So one of the core pieces of technology I'm using on my SaaS starter kit, which by the way is something I'm working on, so if you want to purchase it when it's live, go ahead and register to the newsletter, is Drizzle ORM. I like this ORM because it's more low level than something like Prisma, and it has a lot of cool things built into it out of the box. And one of the things that is super important is migration scripts. So one of the things I look for when I'm using an ORM is I want to make sure that it has built-in migration generation support. I don't want to have to write migration scripts by hand. It's very tedious. I think Prisma and Drizzle have kind of spoiled me in the fact that like you don't have to worry too much about writing these scripts, but you still have to create them and you have to set them up in your CI/CD pipeline to run them. So I'm going to walk you through how I did that in the starter kit. And if you want to use Drizzle yourself, you can kind of follow these steps. So inside of Drizzle, when you install it, you can basically create a schema file, which is where you define all the tables that are going to exist in your database. Now, in my case, I'm using SQLite. So in my Drizzle config, I'm basically just pointing it to a SQLite client here. So libsql client. And then in production, I'm using Terso. So that's why I'm using libsql. But if you go to your drizzle config.ts, you'll see that there is an out property here that points to a Drizzle directory. And so this is where it's going to tell Drizzle, hey, when you create migration scripts, make sure you put them in this Drizzle folder. And you can see here, I have a migration script that's already created. So for those who don't know, a migration script is just a bunch of SQL commands that live in a file. And as you are working and iterating and adding new features to your application, you create a migration script to change your database to allow these new features to work. So for example, if you add a new table, well, then you're probably going to have to add a create table statement so you can apply that to your production database. And then also you need to run it locally. Okay, so let's just kind of walk you through how a migration script works and how you generate it with Drizzle. So the first thing I typically add to any of my Drizzle projects is I add a db::generate method. And that is just going to use Drizzle kit. It's going to call generate : the name of your driver. So I'm going to say SQLite, and then I point it to my configuration file. And what this is going to do is it's going to compare your schema file against your database and figure out what it needs to add or change or do in its migration scripts. So in our case, I'm using SQLite locally here. I have a local.db file. And let's just show you this. If I go to my schema, let's just add a new table. That might be easy enough to explain. So I'll make a new table. I'll call it like hello, and we'll call it hello over here. And that can just have a name on it instead of email. Okay, so if I save this schema file and go back over here, I can run that generate command. And by the way, I'm using turbo repo for this starter kit. So I have to do npm. I'll do a filter with the web app over here. And then I'm going to say run db generate. Okay, so after running that, you'll see that it goes over here and it compares my current SQLite database against my change schema file. And it says, hey, your SQL migration file has been generating. So go over here. We have a new migration script called Slim Molecule Man. Click on this and let's look at this. So this migration script, all it does is create a table called hello. It defines the columns and then it defines a unique index on that table for that column hello. So now that we have the script, what I recommend doing is read through it. Make sure it seems like it's good. Make sure there's nothing in here that could potentially blow away data or delete a table or something. You do have to like spend some time just inspecting the script. There's also another command called Prisma db push, which kind of runs the migration for you automatically and doesn't create these. But when you're getting to production, you still want to have a migration script created for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and run db migrate. So if I look at my package.json over here, we have a db::migrate command, which is going to basically run node using -r esbuild register against this migrate file that I created. So if you read through the Drizzle docs, they're not very opinionated on how you run these migration scripts, but they do have a built-in migrate function that you can basically pass your Drizzle connection to, point it to the folder where you want the migrations to run, and that's going to loop through all of your files here and apply them to your database if it hasn't already applied them. So let's just go ahead and run this real quick. And you'll see that it's going to apply that table. Let's go over here. I'm going to do DB Studio so we can kind of inspect the database. Over here, that gives me a link to a local studio editor. Okay, so now if you look at the tables, you'll see there's a Drizzle migrations table. So if you look at this, the second one that just ran is that new migration script. And we also have a new table called hello. So it did apply that migration script. and it created the table for us. Now, the reason we're tracking this in the table is so that if you were to run this again or redeploy to production, it's not going to run the migration script again because everything's already created. All right, so that's the first step, is creating these migration scripts. The second step is when you push this code to production, you want this to basically automatically run against your production database. Now, there's various ways you can do this. You can make this a manual step that you run from your laptop. The way I did it is if you go to the package.json, what I did is I just appended a db migrate whenever I run npm start. Because I'm hosting this on Railway, when the VPS turns on and tries to run and deploy my application, it's going to run this script, and that is going to have the credentials set up already to connect to my Terso database. So that's going to run through my migration scripts, apply them to my production database automatically for me, and then it's going to start my app. And then if for whatever reason my migration scripts fail, it won't actually, migrate to the new changes. It'll just keep my old application running and not tear it down. So hopefully that was good information. If you're using Drizzle ORM, you want to figure out how do you actually apply migration scripts to a production instance. That's one way you can do it. But if you're interested in getting updates for when the starter kit is live and you want to purchase it, be sure to subscribe to the newsletter at wdcstarterkit.com. And then I'll probably send out some updates along the way as I make some progress. All right, have a good day and happy coding.